Hello everyone, this is Final Voice TV. I come your way today with another exciting story or edition. Do you know there is a country called Azania in Africa? Before I tell you that story about Azania or where you can locate Azania in Africa, I take you back to 1897, somewhere in Ghana or the Gold Coast, where the people of Ghana came up with something they called the Aborigines Right Protection Society. And this society or group of people were only calling for the lands that belong to Ghanaians. They were not fighting the imperialists. They were only talking about what is rightfully theirs. Let's get to Zimbabwe, somewhere in the 60s. 1960s throughout 70s, 80s, and 90s. There was an issue of land grabbing and who owns the land of Zimbabwe. Finally, the people of Zimbabwe rose up to the occasion, and now the lands belong to the people of Zimbabwe. Now, where is Azania? Do you know the country called Azania? That the people of Azania can't own their lands. They can't beat their chest and say, this land belongs to us. I'm going for a break. When I come back, I tell you that story about Azania, a country in Africa, and how the people of Azania can get their lands, or what means they would like to use to get their lands and build roads and hospitals for their people. You can join this discussion by leaving your comment in the comment section. Like this video and kindly subscribe. Let's have that audience to discuss issues that bother Africans and other countries on this planet. I'll be right back.
Apartheid, the Afrikaans word for apartness, was all about strict laws targeting visible minorities in South Africa and is viewed as one of the darkest periods in the nation's history. For nearly half a century, non-white South Africans were stripped of their freedoms and suffered under government-imposed restrictions. It's been over 30 years after apartheid, and yet racial inequalities exist in South Africa. In this video, we would walk you through frequently asked questions. Why does segregation still exist in South Africa? Would South Africa government's expropriation bill achieve its purpose? According to Amil Umraw 2018, the numbers about South Africa's squatter camp is telling. More than 5 million black South Africans live in informal dwellings across South Africa. That's 385 times the number of white citizens in the same housing bracket. According to AfricaCheck, which sourced data from Statistics South Africa's 2016 community survey, 11.4% of South Africa's black population live in informal dwellings. That's slightly more than 5.1 million people. The colored community forms South Africa's second largest informal dwelling population, with 276,348 people living in informal settlements or in the backyards of other properties. That's 5.7% of the colored population in the country. Of the 1.3 million Indian citizens in South Africa, 0.9% live in informal dwellings. And of the 4.5 million white South Africans, 13,310 live in the lowest housing bracket. That's 0.3% of the white population in the country. All major railways and roads connect the mines and farms to ports. Have you ever wondered why the rail networks don't connect to black minority homes or regions? Lucky Dube once said, "Different colors, one people." In court, to wit, no matter your color, we are one people. But the big puzzle is who should own more land to build factories, houses, schools, hospitals, etc. in South Africa. Azania belongs to which people?
So, call Azania South Africa. South Africa is the Azania I am talking about. A bill has been passed. The expropriation bill has been passed in South Africa. The government wants to build roads and hospitals for the people of South Africa. But the people of Azania or South Africa don't even own lands. And that brought about the need to present this bill in Parliament, and the bill got passed in Azania or South Africa. On this show with me today is one nobleman by name Mr. Mitchell Mahachi, an author, a columnist, and a fellow researcher.
Yes.
Fellow researcher. So we're talking about South Africa and the expropriation bill, which was laid in Parliament, and it's been passed.
Yes.
Is it good for the people of South Africa? And can countries in Africa learn from this expropriation bill that has been passed in South Africa?
Right, thank you, Charles, and it's a pleasure once again to be talking about issues pertaining to Africa, and in particular this very important topic and very hotly contested topic in the history of mankind. The issue of land has always been central to many arguments, many disputes, many wars. And so we find ourselves in this same situation with regards to South Africa. But before we answer this question, I think it is important that we go back and try to understand how we come to this situation that we actually have in South Africa. So I will just go through some trivia that I think is important for our listeners so that they can have a background on the issue to do with land in South Africa. So we have the issue of South Africa. We start off with the demographic situation in South Africa. So we have a total population in South Africa of around almost 60 million as of now. And the composition of this population is we actually have a black population of around 45 million. And we also have a white population of 4 million. The colored population slightly around 5 million, and the Indian population said to be around 1.5 million.
So if I should go to South Africa right now, I will see more blacks than other people, right? Like other nationals or other people of different countries.
Yes, definitely. Like I mentioned, like 45 million out of the 60 is actually just black people. So, but what I want is to correlate the black population with regards to land ownership. So, of the total land in South Africa, this 45 million group that we mentioned actually only owns only 4% of the total population of the total land in South Africa. And the white population, which is only 4 million, owns the 72%. And then we have a colored population that owns 15%. And the Indian population actually even owns more land than the black population, because despite just having 1.5 million Indians, they actually own about 5% of the land.
So the land in South Africa does not even belong to the people of South Africa. I mean the real people of the land.
Yes.
Because Indians even own more land than the indigenes.
Yes.
So if I want to farm, if I want to establish a factory, if I want to build a hospital, I don't have the land to do that.
Yeah, so the issue of land is really a difficult situation in South Africa, and we will also look at how this actually came to be. So what I wanted to point out is the value of this land that we are talking about in terms of agriculture. So it is also very instructive to know that the contribution of agriculture to the economy of South Africa is not more than 4%. So it's around 3% thereabout, the total contribution of agriculture to the GDP. Right. And from the statistics that I have managed to get, it actually points out that there are about 32,000 commercial farmers, and of these 32,000 commercial farmers, 7,000 actually produce 80% of the total agricultural produce. So what we are saying is 32,000 farmers are actually like the commercial farmers, and from these only 7,000 produce 80% of all the output that we have in agriculture. So we're actually saying that there are very few players within this agricultural sector. And then that value of this whole production that we are actually talking about is around 81 billion rands. So 81 billion rands contributes to only 2.3% of the GDP of South Africa. And this, we are saying that is only around 7,000 farmers are kind of like controlling this whole sector that we are talking about. So, but how do we come to this point? So this actually starts off with the arrival of Jan van Riebeeck in South Africa around the I'm forgetting which year it was, but around 1600s. So from that time, they then are policies or acts that then actually dispossess the African people of their land. So there was the Natives Land Act in 1913, and the purpose of this act was actually to restrict ownership of land by blacks. And then it was followed up by the Black Administration Act in 1927. Again, it's also on this same notion that they want to restrict ownership of land by black people. But this is not just restricted to South Africa alone. So this whole thing of acts that are dispossessing people, you might find it in Zimbabwe, you might find it in Kenya, you find it in Ghana, is the same kind of method that was actually used. There were acts that were put that kind of remove the black population from a certain area, putting them to another region. But the most important one that I want to point out was the Group Areas Act of 1950. So the Group Areas Act, what it actually did was to segregate land by race. So we had land that then was categorized as black, as Indian, as white. So you could not then own land outside your racial group. So if you are black, you only own land within the area that is for black people, and you can't go and own land in the Indian section or in the white section. You are restricted to land within the group that you have. So what this did then is that even if you had the opportunity or the resources to own land elsewhere, you could not then do this. So this then would explain how we come to this 4%. So if the total amount of land allocated to black people, say, was, let's just give an example, 5%. So this is the restriction that you have, that you can only own within this 5%. And then there are also some other acts that were coming in so that you could then not own land and also just come to provide the labor. And these same principles we also find in the other countries that I mentioned. So this then brings us to this issue that we are talking about expropriation, the expropriation bill that you just mentioned. So the key issues that we have around this expropriation bill that we would want to be talking about. So the first thing that we actually notice is, should we actually go for expropriation with compensation or without compensation? Which of the two is maybe the preferable way?
Yeah, which of the two is preferable? Compensation or without compensation? Who owns the land in South Africa? Can the government of South Africa get lands to build roads and hospitals at no cost or at a cost? Going for a break, I'll be right back. You can join this discussion of land issues in South Africa by leaving your comment in the comment section, like this video, and kindly subscribe and join us in next discussions of similar topics. I'll be right back.
Dear viewer, kindly like this video, subscribe, hit the notification bell for more videos.
Right. Thank you once again. So we come to this point that we've been mentioning about the situation in South Africa, about the ownership of land is actually tilted heavily in favor of the white people, who are only, let's say, almost 5 million people, and owning 72% of the land. And we have the Indian community, which is around 1.5 million, owning 5% of the land. And the black population, which is actually around 45 million, owning only 4% of the land. There actually have been efforts that have been made by the South African government to address this issue of land. But unfortunately, there's been this issue of a willing buyer, willing seller. And so the issue is that this has not actually been so successful, because then the prices of the land, the prices of the farms that want to be appropriated by the government have been so high that the government has been unable to buy them. So this then probably prompts the government then to come up with this land expropriation bill.
So it's a kind of private good versus public good. Yeah. I own the land, so it's a private good. Mm-hmm. The government says no, it's about time we have some of these private goods as public goods.
Yes.
And that will call for compensation or no compensation.
Yes. So this then brings us to this issue of compensation or non-compensation. And so we just want to look at if the land is actually taken without compensation, what does this actually mean? So, or what would be the benefits of doing this? So we have mentioned this aspect of the black population actually losing their land, and how it was actually done on a racial basis, and until the inequality in the population is heavily tilted against the black people. So what we then see is that we have 45 million only limited to only 4% of the land. So if this is kind of redressed through land expropriation, what it means is if it is done without compensation, that might actually mean that the money that was supposed to be used for compensation can then be used to, for instance, assist the new farmers, the black farmers who would have been given the land, or the money can also be used for other social amenities. It might be schools,
hospitals,
it might
roads.
be, yes, all these various things, particularly housing also, because we actually have a housing issue in South Africa. So if some of this money can actually be used for resettling people for farms as well as for residential purposes, and the money also that was supposed to be used for the compensation can then be used for the housing. So that could actually be sort of a win-win situation. And then it could also be an opportunity for the marginalized black community to then also have access to own, say, natural resources such as minerals and so on, which hitherto they have not been able to access. So this would be kind of the advantages that would be opened up by not compensating the farmers. And also probably we actually think that if it is opened up and there's no compensation, it might open up also chances for economic development within the rural areas. So these are some of the advantages that would come up with non-compensation. However, going ahead with this non-compensation also has its challenges. It actually presents some threats to the economy. So on one end, we actually see that the people that we are talking about who would need to be compensated are mostly white farmers.
Yeah.
You remember I mentioned there are around 30,000 farmers who are actually doing most of the work. And these people have actually taken up loans for them to be able to be doing whatever work that they are doing. So what it means is, if they are not being compensated and they have taken loans, this exposes the banks and actually puts the financial sector at risk. So this is actually one challenge that emanates from this non-compensation if it is actually gone in that direction.
Yeah.
And we also see the other challenges that are actually within this scope of compensation. So what exactly will be compensated? Is it the improvements or is it the land? And at which sort of ratio? So how do we decide, let's say, on the ratio for the land or the ratio for the improvements? Some people say the buildings or the land itself only constitutes around 10% of farming activity, and therefore the improvements will be 90%. But is this acceptable to all the parties that are concerned? So these are some of the areas that are also maybe topical around this issue of compensation. But we also want to point out that even if we say that there is, let's say, no compensation, it also implies that someone, somewhere, somehow is going to pay for this this compensation that was supposed to have been done.
Yeah.
So there are some challenges, as we have mentioned, to this whole aspect of non-compensation. And there are also questions, because there are some people who actually say that there is land that has actually been also redistributed to black farmers earlier on, because there's been this process of redistribution of land earlier in South Africa. But the results, or some of the land, is actually not being used efficiently. So there are fears that if it is actually done on a larger scale, then it might actually mean that more land is actually not going to be utilized efficiently. So these are concerns that are also coming from other quarters, and I think they also have a point, because we have actually seen it in other places where farmers were given land, but they are not actually using it as efficiently.
So it's such a great bill. I mean, that could help. I mean, the people of South Africa, whether they are white or black, it doesn't matter, because it's in the end supposed to help the people of South Africa. I mean, we're claiming lands for public good, that we can build roads, hospitals, schools, and many more. This is Final Voice TV. You can join this discussion by leaving your comments in the comment section. Like this video, hit on the like button, and kindly subscribe. Let's get that audience for similar topics or similar discussions. So before just as you're about to wrap up, would you like to say the government of South Africa is actually doing the right thing, I mean, for the generation now and the generation unborn?
Right. Like I said, it's a very difficult situation that they have in South Africa. But talking about it and doing action about it is something also that is actually something to be applauded. Because if they just lay their hands and it is not solved, the situation in South Africa is like a time bomb that will actually explode at some other point. Like I mentioned, this statistics is actually mind-boggling, that we only have 45 million restricted to 4% of the land, and we actually have 5 million with 72% of the land. So this, together with the inequalities that actually existed during this apartheid era, and you take into account the recent lootings that have been happening in South Africa, it actually points to a disaster that we are actually like keeping. So to answer your question, the move that has been done by the South African government as of now to deal with this issue of land, I think it is a good idea. However, what I think is the whole land acquisition should not actually be a one-size-fits-all, because the issue of land is required for various purposes. We mentioned that there is land that is needed for settlement. There is land that is actually needed for agricultural purposes. So this actually entails that a solution that entails all the various stakeholders has to be in place. They have to take into account, for instance, the food security of the nation. So because we have seen it in other countries, the moment that you engage in a land reform and it is not structured around food security, it might actually mean that there's going to be a time where there's going to be food shortages and actually some difficulties in terms of the food security situation.
Yeah. So somewhere in the bill I read that to receive compensation, you have to provide the history of how you acquired the land. You tell the government of South Africa how you acquired the land and other things that will also make you the real owner of the land before you can be compensated. So it's going to be interesting as the days go by. It's such a great bill. We applaud it because it's for the public interest. I mean, when schools are built, when roads are built, I mean, it's for the people of South Africa. Whether you are white or black, it doesn't matter. But as to who really owns the land in South Africa will be determined by this bill. This is Final Voice TV. This is where we end today's discussion. You can join the discussion, as I mentioned, by leaving your comment in the comment section, like this video, and kindly subscribe and join other discussions on this channel. Thank you for watching.